Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch with some game engine news. That is Stride 4 has been released. Now this news can get a little bit confusing and I am part of the confusion factor because I've reported this news back in July. Yes, on July 27th I reported that Stride 4 was released. And I made a little bit of a mistake there. I guess what I reported on was Stride 4 Beta was released. It actually wasn't the final release as of yet, but today it is. So that is what we're going to look at today, Stride 4 and what it is all about. Now, if you've never heard of Stride before, well, hey, this could get a little bit confusing too. Stride started life as a commercial game engine called Paradox 3D from a company called Silicon Studios, which was actually formed from Silicon Graphics Japan, which, you know, is SGI, as in the people that basically invented the computer graphics industry. They make a number of middleware products, and they started making this game engine. Well, it never really worked out. At one point in time, the Paradox name, which I admit was a little bit overused, was renamed to Xenko. And then a couple years back, Xenko was open sourced, spun off from Silicon Studios. It is now its own open source project, and at that point in time it got renamed again to Stride. So here we are now looking at Stride. If you want to go ahead and grab Stride, by the way, it is an open source C# game engine, free downloads available right here. The downside is, what platforms can you use? You can target Windows, Android, iOS, Xbox One, but you can only run it. Your system requirements are Windows. So, to you Linux fellows, I don't know if this will run under some kind of an emulation layer. I have no clue. But this is primarily a Windows-only game engine, just something to be aware of. So, about Stride itself, what is it all about? Next-gen graphics, which, by the way, we have Vulkan support now, part of what is coming up in the release notes I'll talk about in a second. Photolistic real rendering, full multi-threading, VR-ready, C#8 scripting, built-in game templates, flexible asset toolchain creation, flexible custom rendering pipeline. It is open source under the MIT license, a community forming around it, documentation that's available. We already kind of mentioned on the platforms that are available out there. One of those things that's interesting is iOS and Android through Xamarin. I imagine that is ultimately going to change. And if you want to get into the full deep dive of what features are out there, they're here. There's quite a few tools built in here. So you got the built support for nested prefabs. There's a graphics compositor for doing setting up your rendering pipeline. There is UI support built in here, including a UI editor. We got sprite supports in there, curve editor, a full-blown scene editor, advanced graphics options including DirectX 12 and Vulkan rendering. We got particle systems and advanced shader language, PBR support, scene streaming, C# scripting, physics, navigation, multi-threaded animation, virtual reality support, and more. So let's do a quick look at Stride itself. As again, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail because quite frankly, I've covered this engine a couple of times in the past if you want to get hands-on with it. Here you can see the main character from one of these demos. This demo is called Starbreach. It is open source. It is from a GDC 2017 demonstration they did. Here you can see a character within it. This character is created as a prefab character. As you can see, scripts can be attached directly. So this is a script, a C# script that is attached. You can expose values out, such as the keys to interact with to do various different things. So this is your input handler. Fire handler, we got audio emitter components on here, etc. So it is a component-based system. You see here there are a number of different components available out there. So it's a pretty recognizable setup. Nothing really going to shock you. You control things by attaching C#-based scripts to them. As you can see, a number of them are defined over here. It has tight Visual Studio integration. And yeah, so let's just do a quick lap around this level. And you can see it's got a nice clean look about it. It's got good asset importing capabilities. And yeah, you know, some people would say, oh, it's a Unity clone or whatever. I think it's different enough for sure. It actually more reminds me of Wave Engine from a UI perspective than any others. But this is a quick hands-on look at I keep wanting to call it Xenko, at the Stride game engine. If you want to learn more about it, again, I have done a couple of videos in the past. Today we're focusing on what is new in the 4.0 release. So let's head on back over and find out. Okay, so Stride 4.0 is now live. Some of the details are available here in the release note, so it no longer has the beta tag. It is now called Stride. Covered that one already. One of the new features here, and a lot of these have drilled down, so if you want to learn more about them or walk through on how to actually use them, that information is available. But they have added voxel cone tracing global illumination, so it's a nice way of it's using voxels to get nicer shadows and reflections in your scene. The number of customizations are available for it. As I mentioned earlier on, there is a step-by-step guide on setting up voxel cone tracing global illumination in your project available there. Another major thing here is .NET Core. Now, .NET Core is kind of confusing if you're not from the world of .NET, but once upon a time, there was something called the .NET Framework. This was Microsoft, and it was proprietary to Microsoft. And then there was another project called Mono, and Mono implemented something called the Mono framework. Mono, as a company, kind of was bought by Novell, of all people, ended up coming back to life as Xamarin. Now, Xamarin essentially made a version of Mono, or C# for Android and iOS and a couple of other platforms. They basically made a cross-platform version of .NET. Eventually, Microsoft bought Xamarin and started working towards creating a nice cross-platform version of .NET. So you had the .NET framework and you had the Xamarin framework. Well, this is all quite stupid. So what they eventually did was said, okay, let's consolidate everything together. We're going to create .NET Core, which runs on multiple platforms. Originally, .NET Core was kind of a back-end only thing. It didn't have the GUI frameworks or that kind of stuff in. A lot of the stuff was missing. So it was good for making server applications that were cross-platform or whatever. But now .NET Core is .NET. Going forward, if you are going to use C# 8 or 9 or whatever, you are going to need to support .NET. And this is a problem that every game engine that uses C# is going to face. For example, Godot support for .NET is provided via Xamarin. And going forward, Xamarin has no future as far as I know. The future is .NET Core. So this is an important thing if you're a C# engine. And they support .NET Core. And they've also made some strides towards better support for .NET Core, including the Stride editor and toolchain are now running in .NET Core. Runtime has been working with .NET Core for several versions already. Allows us to have scripts and custom assets in a project targeting .NET Standard and .NET Core. If you have a script or custom asset in .NET Framework project rather than a .NET Standard project, you could still choose between .NET Core and .NET Framework within the launcher. The .NET Framework version can be considered deprecated and will likely be removed in a future version, and we're talking near future, 4.1, to allow us to take full advantage of C# 8 and soon to come C# 9. So again, if you are a C# game engine, your future is .NET Core. If you don't want to put the work in or you don't want to go that route, yeah, the future is looking a little spooky. So they're also expecting to drop .NET Framework and supporting only .NET Core will greatly simplify our installation process since we won't depend on specific workloads or packages of Visual Studio being installed anymore. This was a recurring issue with their users. So that is the big thing. They plan to switch to .NET 5, which is .NET Core. Okay, so again, .NET Framework went up to 4.955, whatever. So that now is not going to be a thing anymore. .NET Framework is not going to exist anymore. .NET Core is not going to exist anymore. Xamarin is not going to exist anymore. .NET Core will become simply .NET. Make sense? Hopefully. All right, so when that happens, it will be called .NET 5, which, by the way, is just the next version of .NET Core, if you were wondering. Next up, we have flexible GPU instancing from community contribution. It's GPU instancing per model. Nice thing is, plays together with the entity component system, simply adding an instancing component to an entity with a model. Then you can choose 3 ways of how you generate instances. So entity transforms uses transformation of the other entity with an instance component. This allows you to add components like physics, audio, etc. to the instance. User array provides an array of matrices via script. User buffer for providing a structured buffer GPU resource, and they've got easy ways of working. Works for skinning, by the way. They've got a couple templates set up of instance model and model instance. I don't actually know what the model instance is for, but there is some documentation available there. So pretty straightforward in approach. Let's take a model right here. Like select this character right here. So we went ahead, I added an instancing type component to it. So you go ahead, you can add that as a typical component. So instancing or instance, There's instance and instancing. Since I've already added one, it's not available right there. So now we can use the new setup for creating a new instance of it. So we got main scene. It's going to go ahead and create new. So there's the new 2 templates, instance model. Again, I don't know what the model instance is about, and their naming convention could use a little bit of disambiguation there, but instance model is pretty straightforward. It's got this nice little tool here for setting it up. So go ahead, we'll pick our character. I pick the character base right there, and now we have a new instance available. So there are other ways out there you can do this via an array and so on. If you want to learn more about the instancing side of things, again, the documentation is available right there. And then some improvements on the way you select rendering engines and some Vulkan improvements in general. So from now on, user projects will use the Stride graphics API in the CS project to specify the graphics API. Hope to expose this in the editor later. So for now, you got to set it directly in the CS project file for your project. Also took the opportunity to improve the state of Vulkan renderer and automatize. Is that a word? Automatized graphics unit tests currently running for DirectX 3D 11 and Vulkan. Still a work in progress, so expect more in future releases. And there are some improvements to their document and tutorials, including 10 beginner tutorials on their YouTube channel and improvements to their online documentation. There's also a new template, creating C# beginner template for getting started. So yeah, that is basically Stride 4. It'll be very similar to what I covered back in July. If you are interested, Stride is once again a completely open source project available up on GitHub. I will of course have this linked with everything else in the linked article down below if you want to check it out and learn more. It is a patron-backed project. It's 90% C# with 4% C++ and Pascal. Okay, every once in a while, I think that the language breakdown on GitHub kind of goes wrong. So anyways, that is the release that's there. The license is, as mentioned earlier, under the MIT license, a very liberal license in what it allows you to do. And again, the web page, also mention this. There's also the Star Breach demo. That is what you saw in action right here. So if you want to see a demo with a little bit more guts to it, it's basically a vertical slice of gameplay. It's a good place to start, and it looks good. So if you want to check that out, that is available here. That one is released under the MIT license as well, which is quite nice. So again, if you are interested, Stride is available at stride3d.net. Yeah, that's Stride, and that's Stride 4.0. I was going to say the only thing that I find here, and by the way, they do have a Discord. I will link that to the article down below. So if you want to get involved with Stride or ask some questions or anything else, I generally am linking sites' Discords now. I think it's kind of the future. So if you have some more questions or you just want to pop in and say hi, their Discord will be Their Discord will be linked in the article down below. Stride is one of those things. I've got a lot of excitement for it. It's a nice, clean room design. It's very professional. It's got a nice, fast core. It's now .NET, which is very nice to see. It's improving very slowly. So hopefully that is something that changes. I don't know the size of the team, but the fact that this is basically the same beta I covered back in July, and there's not a ton new there. And when you look at like how much has happened in, say, Godot or GDevelop or even Unity or Unreal, which is not really a fair comparison because those guys have, multi-$100 million budgets there, but Godot certainly doesn't, and the state of change between these two is a little disconcerting. I kind of hope to see some forward progress on Stride. I don't know if there's a bunch of work going on behind the scenes, and I don't know if the .NET migration took a lot out of them, but in order to get an engine like this to really grow, you need to have releases so people can get excited about it, so I can link stories to it so people can learn about it and people can get on board, and hopefully we start seeing more of that in the future. But anyways, what do you think of Stride? Have you checked it out, and what do you think of this release? Let me know, comments down below. Talk to you all later. Goodbye.